Minecraft combat at first glance seems pretty straightforward. Just swing your sword at the enemy until they are dead. Or, if you prefer, shoot your enemies from a distance until they're dead. However, if you've ever watched high-level Minecraft Hunger Games, Skywars, or anything involving player versus player combat, you will know that there are a lot of nuances to effectively eliminating your opponent. Pro players can use every tool, block and item they obtain to get the upper hand in a fight. As such, there are a couple of items that, while never considered by more casual players to bring into a fight, are actually pretty useful to help you get into an advantageous position in a fight. So, what up YouTube? It's Luca, and in this video I will be discussing several niche combat tools in Minecraft, which include items that I think are underexplored and actually can be pretty useful in a fight, and also some items that are designed to be good for combat, but actually aren't really good for combat due to some critical shortcomings. Enjoy! So, starting off on a little bit of an oddball, we have the crossbow, which isn't really niche because it is underexplored. Yes, not a lot of people use the crossbow, but that's mostly because it's just a straight up worse version of the regular bow. You see, ranged weapons, like the bow and the crossbow, are designed to, well, effectively deal a lot of damage from a distance. And in this aspect, the crossbow has some major disadvantages when compared to the bow. For example, it has a longer recharge time than the bow, though this can be remedied by one of the crossbow's signature enchantments being quick charge. However, this is far from the crossbow's biggest issue, as the two arguable best enchantments for a regular bow, Power and Infinity, are not compatible with the crossbow. Quick fun fact, in creative mode you can actually put Power and Infinity on a crossbow, however they don't really work, like the projectile doesn't become any stronger and you still consume arrows when recharging, but it's pretty interesting. Anyway, what this broadly means is that the crossbow has no way of increasing its damage output outside of equipping fireworks as its ammo, which, while it can do a lot of damage under the right circumstances, is a lot more costly and less splashable than a regular Power and Infinity enchanted bow. The crossbow does have two other potentially useful signature enchantments that I haven't mentioned yet, being Piercing and especially Multi-Shot. However, these are mostly only useful for fighting against large groups of mobs, not really in a 1 versus 1 between two players. So all in all, the crossbow is just much more niche than the regular bow, only outshining it in a few specific circumstances. While dripstone crystals can hardly be called an effective weapon, or a subtle one for that matter, they can occasionally be effective for traps, like this one that I showed off in a video about a year or something ago. Anyway, the crystals can allow you to deal massive damage to your opponent in one hit, even armored ones, when used right. And that's kinda it. Or it would be if there wasn't another somewhat obscure use for dripstone in combat. A lot of players may not know about this interaction, but when you throw a trident at a dripstone crystal, the impact of the trident will also cause the crystal to fall. This makes dripstone marginally more useful in PvP, as with a trident in hand, players can more effectively make use of the damage and surprise factor of dripstone crystals without taking the time to step back from the fight and dedicate a whole setup to it. However, getting a dripstone crystal to actually connect with a fast moving target is still quite difficult, and unfortunately, you can't do the same thing with a bow. A shame, because I think that if you could use a bow to trigger the falling crystal, dripstone would probably be more highly regarded as an offbeat but incredibly dangerous combat tool. However, in its current state it's still a niche object, only very sparingly being used to score a big hit. Also, you can do this with dripstone, which I think is pretty cool. So, the fishing rod is probably one of the more well-known items that have a small niche in combat. While a lot of people have probably had a good laugh irritating their friends by pulling them in constantly with a fishing rod, this property actually gives it a niche in combat. After all, pulling an opponent closer to you can prevent a low health player from escaping, or keep them close in a fight so you can combo more hits on them, or just cause an opponent to fall to their death when fighting at great heights. You could also use this in standard single player Minecraft to, I don't know, pull a blaze or a skeleton closer so you can more effectively melee them. I don't recommend using this technique against many other mobs though, especially not against creepers. Anyway, another application of the fishing rod is that it can also be used to reel certain projectiles to change their trajectory. Now, the rod cannot interact with every projectile. For example, you can't use it to redirect a wither skull, no matter how cool it would be. However, other important projectiles, like fireballs from a blaze and ghast, can be redirected. You can even use the fishing rod to fling some lit TNT, or even slightly change the trajectory of a falling anvil, or a dripstone crystal. While these use cases are pretty specific, it's always fun to use your opponent's own projectiles against them and feel like a god when you pull it off successfully to save yourself from certain death. Alright, so here we are on a server that's hosted by a few people from my university. I mean, it's pretty dead nowadays, but here we have a PvP arena that I built. So inside we have 4 islands where people are basically supposed to do battle, and each island basically has their own hazard. Well, except for the Skulk Island, that one is actually pretty safe. But, however, we're going to the Snow Island, and you might be able to see it already, but mixed in between the regular snow blocks, I poured down some powdered snow. And check this out. I can't move anymore. I'm literally mashing everything, every button on my keyboard. But I can't escape without breaking or collecting the powdered snow in some way. So yeah, if I was fighting against another player right now when this happened, that would probably be GG. So yeah, powdered snow. A pretty straightforward tool that can completely kill your opponent's momentum, and that's a pretty big deal. You know, we've all seen Minecraft PvP clips before of players flying across each other's screen. Mobility is a big factor in determining the outcome of a 1v1, and a well-placed bucket of powdered snow can thus greatly turn the tide of combat in your favor if you manage to land it on your opponent. It does have some of the same problems that Dripstone has, namely that it is pretty difficult to connect on a fast-moving player, since it only covers one block. However, at least the powdered snow still lingers after being placed, unlike the dripstone which you only get one shot at, and it's also much easier to make use of on the go. So yeah, I believe powdered snow can be a great combat tool when used well, and I'm honestly surprised that barely anyone seems to be acknowledging it. Now listen. The Trident isn't really a great PvP weapon in Minecraft. The only enchantment that increases the Trident's damage is Impaling, which only does so when fighting aquatic mobs. Thus, while the Trident does great base damage, there is no way to increase the damage it deals against non-aquatic mobs, including other players. Moreover, the Trident's base damage is only slightly higher than a diamond sword, so even with 2 or 3 levels of sharpness, the sword will start rivaling and outshining the Trident in terms of raw damage. However, the Trident can also be used as a ranged weapon, where it doesn't fare much better. Even with the loyalty enchantment, it can sometimes take quite a while for the Trident to land back in your hands, and it is thus much more efficient to just use a bow. Also, just like with the sword, the bow has a way of increasing its raw damage against players through the power enchantment, while the Trident has none of that. So yeah, In terms of combat, the Trident seems pretty outclassed on all fronts, so why should you use it? Well, it's simple. The Trident is a much better combat tool when it is used for movement, not damage. You see, arguably the best enchantment for a Trident is Riptide, which basically turns your Trident into a few stacks of ender pearls when fighting in the rain or in water. Like I mentioned earlier, mobility is a big factor in Minecraft PvP, and with a Trident in your offhand, you can become incredibly mobile whilst still able to swing your sword in your main hand, allowing you to either charge at your opponent swinging or make a quick escape when things get dicey. I remember doing some fighting matches on a survival server with my friends, with all of us having Elytras, but only me having a Riptide Trident. We just so happened to be fighting on the coastline, and while the other guys had to burn all of their fireworks just to catch up to me, I could just use my Trident and wait for them to run out. I was very happy with my Trident then, because I am by far one of the worst PvPers you have ever seen, and would have totally gotten destroyed if it weren't for the Trident. So yeah, the Trident is not a bad combat tool in Minecraft, but you just need to know how to use it best. Now that we're almost at the end of the video, I wanted to quickly highlight some honorable mentions. These three could very well have made their way into the video properly, however I didn't really have as much to say about them than the other items in this video, so I'm putting them together at the end here. First up is potions. I probably could have gone into detail about how I think potions are underrated and how they can be insanely useful, not only when exploring the world, but also when battling mobs and other players. However, I can't do that because of the fact that I have already made another entire video dedicated to that topic. So just go watch that if you're interested. Next up is Soulfire, a pretty cool looking variation of, well, normal fire that comes into being when you light either soul soil or soul sand on fire. However, the distinction is not just visual, as there is another huge mechanical change that sets the two fires apart. When an entity stands in Soulfire, they will take twice as much damage from the burning compared to regular fire. This makes Soulfire more effective in combat than regular fire, though it is a bit hampered by the fact that Soulfires can only exist on soil sand and soul soil. I guess you could also carry some soul campfires around with you, as those also do more damage than regular campfires when stood upon, but it's still niche enough to not really come into play very often. And lastly, we have cobwebs, another great tool for hampering your opponent's mobility, but we've already discussed the powdered snow, and I didn't really want to feature something so similar twice prominently in the video. If anything, cobwebs are probably even more effective at this than powdered snow. However, I felt like many people probably already know about cobwebs as such a tool, whereas powdered snow is used way less. But yeah, using cobwebs to slow your opponent down and leave them vulnerable to free hits is a pretty effective strategy in PvP. And that's it. That's the video, guys. Thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something new. I hope you've been inspired in some way. And of course, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and you want to show that support, then be sure to do that in whatever way you deem fit. Either by liking, subscribing, commenting. I don't really care, as long as it makes us both happy. I'd appreciate it, like I said before, because these types of videos generally take a lot of effort to put together. And yeah, if you want me to make a video on another topic related to Minecraft in this style, then I'm always open to suggestions. And that's just about all from me. So if you plan on sticking around, I hope to see you all in a good mood in the next video. And I'm gonna go now. Goodbye everyone.